Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dr. Gershon with another BetterHealth webinar. I am absolutely delighted to be here today with a real leader in entrepreneurship, Frank Rimalovski, who is the executive director at NYU and the Entrepreneurial Institute, amongst other things. We are going to talk about all the things that entrepreneur founders really need to know about the current state of entrepreneurship. There's going to be an overlay of discussions about AI and how that's changing the landscape from an investor perspective, from an industry investor perspective, as well as institutional, and how this changes the way that the skill sets of CEO founder entrepreneurs need to adapt to the current fast-moving changes in the world. Before that conversation, I want to just thank everyone once again. We have reached a milestone. We have 1.17 million views in our webinar this month, which is just a testament, really, I think, to the core of what we're trying to do today, which is bring together an incredible resource, which is the power of the entrepreneur, the power of the founder, the power of the investor and industry leaders coming together in an open source platform. It's about sharing, being courageous to be transparent, to form the most important thing in building businesses, which is relationships. And it is our belief at Endeavor and within the Venture Studio that leadership and the ability to be courageous, to know how to build teams, to know how to build partnerships is absolutely vital in an era of illiquidity, which we expect will last 10 to 14 years based upon history. In this period, it's critical to be able to understand that the moat is not your technology. The moat is your ability to bring together a strong team who builds strong relationships with partners in industry, in investor groups, in academia. This is the moat that stands the test of time. And being able to understand how to integrate your company's technology and your team's ability to execute on your promises is what is going to separate winners and losers. So we're going to first take a pause for a second to, I think, frame a little bit about what we tried to do here today. And part of that is a thank you. So thank you, Daniel, for logging in. Thank you, Martin from Norway. Thank you, Tom from Belfast. Jenny Fernandez, who is our Director of Communications and Leadership, thank you so much for taking part, especially because of the milestone this month. Thank you, everyone, for signing in. Please let us know where you're signing in from. If you have questions, please put email in there so that if we don't get it to you today, we'll get it to you through email. And now I'm just going to really pass the microphone over to Frank, because I know that he has a tremendous field of view. He really is a visionary in every aspect of the word. He is authentic in his heartfelt joy, I would say is a proper word, in working with students and working with entrepreneurs. And that energy and that verve you will feel in his conversation with me. More than that, you will hear from someone who I made Frank laugh earlier, I described as Yoda-like, who has seen so many companies and so many cycles within the marketplace, will give you his perspective about how to succeed. And it's critical to be able to put, I think, his perspective and my perspective together. We come at things from a little bit of a different points of view, because it's not a recession that is really problematic. Those usually last 8 to 18 months. This is a liquidity crisis that is fostered by central banks globally, and they usually last a decade or more. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Frank. Let him wow you with his magic. So Frank, welcome. I'm glad I can make you laugh. I enjoy very much working with you, and you really are bringing some, I think, great companies, to investors. I've had the good fortune of speaking to a number of them. Maybe you could start by just introducing yourself, and then some general thoughts about the state of entrepreneurship and the need for strong relationships, collaboration, partnerships as a way to create strength within the value set of the companies.
Well, thank you, Martin, for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege, and I will try my best to live up to those lofty expectations, if not outright hype. But it's great to be here, and I'm happy to share my thoughts with you and your community. So just what I currently do now. So at NYU, I sit in the provost's office, which means we are a central part to the university, running something called the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute, which is an organization that works with students, faculty, and researchers from every school and college within NYU, including our medical center, to help them start startups. So whether you're entrepreneurially curious, you have an idea or invention or intellectual property that you want to turn into a startup, you have a nascent startup that needs help, or you need funding, we have resources at every stage along the way. I'm also an investor through the NYU Innovation Venture Fund, which invests exclusively in startups founded by current NYU students, faculty, and researchers. And we've made 36 investments in startups from the majority of the schools and colleges within NYU, across sectors as diverse as medical devices, therapeutics, and diagnostics, to AI, robotics, consumer, enterprise, hardware, software, bed sheets, bras, and furniture, to show you the diversity that is NYU. Just really quickly, before this, I've been here 13 years, came here to start the venture fund, was a venture capitalist before this at a fund called New Venture Partners that specialized in spinning out very early stage startups, seed stage startups from corporate research labs. We did that with companies like Philips and British Telecom and IBM and Intel and others. And before that, I did something very similar to that inside of Lucent and Bell Laboratories in New Jersey, spinning out new businesses from there. And before that, I spent half dozen years out in Silicon Valley at companies like Apple and Sun Microsystems. So been working in technology for 30 years now, as an investor for going on 25, helping early stage and nascent startups. So that's just a bit about me. In terms of, you make some interesting points. I mean, I think we are at an interesting juncture in startup land. I think particularly as we came out of what I'll call the irrational exuberance of the post-pandemic 2020, 2021 period, returning to what I think is a more, shall we say, normal, if you look at the measures of investment activity, we are still in the top 5 years of all time of venture investment activity. So, I read articles talking about the crisis in venture capital and anyway, all these melodramatic words. There are companies getting funded every day, particularly at the seed and pre-seed stage. There is still a lot of activity, even if it's less than it was a couple of years ago, when arguably maybe it was almost a little too easy for some startups to get funded. But investors are looking, I think, more seriously at teams and at the business that they're presenting. And I use business as a very conscious word choice, not just the technology. The technology is just one piece of it, but understanding how that fits into, particularly in healthcare, the very complex landscape of where you have, different users, decision makers, payers, providers, regulators, that you need to figure out a way to develop a business that actually satisfies all of their needs and problems and preferences and priorities, and then package that story together in a way that I think gets to your point about putting together a narrative that can get people excited. Because when investors look at entrepreneurs, one thing that a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs don't understand is they're not just looking at what the answer is to the question that may have been posed, but how they're telling it and how it reflects on that founder. And are they presenting themselves in a way that says this person knows what they're talking about, and that they are deep in the market and understand their customer and understand what it's going to take to bring this from the lab to the market, to use an overused cliche there. But I'm happy to dive deeper into that with you.
First, a great overview. And let me add a few things onto that to continue this conversation. For me, it's a framework about risk. Every investor thinks about risk.
Absolutely.
Entrepreneurs don't. It's not in their DNA. So one of the call outs, which is based upon real life interactions over the past 6 weeks, I was in 9 conferences. I was a keynote in many of them, a keynote moderator, as well as a panelist. I brought people in from industry to be part of my panels. There was a unified cry from all of the panelists from industry, from Walgreens, from Pfizer, from Novartis, from Boehringer Ingelheim, from CVS, you name it, across every sector that I represent. Single message. We want to understand how you are going to take not just your technology, but your team and execute on what you tell us you can do in a way that's going to be accretive to our business and solve our problems and address our pain points, knowing that we're a large organization with tens of thousands of people, and that there are all kinds of variables that you have to navigate and we have to navigate to be able to use your company's services and products in an effective business-like way. So Frank, I'm picking up on that business comment that you made, because it's not just about the technology. And one of the things that I want CEO entrepreneur founders to understand is these industry leaders want to work with you. They're turning people away because there is a lack of communication using a common framework. And that common framework, for me, is about reshaping the dialogue that you as entrepreneurs should be having with industry leaders. That dialogue is about understanding their business. You need to come to the table understanding their business. And being able to adapt and pivot and grow is part of leadership. So I'd like to pick up and amplify the business aspect and the leadership aspect from your perspective. What kind of advice or suggestions, and perhaps even a case study or two, which I can also chime in on, talk about the impact that being able to adapt, pivot, and grow can have for the success of early stage companies?
Well, I mean, at its core, businesses exist to serve customers. And I think that's one thing that I have to, I don't know that this is unique to NYU, because I feel like I've seen this throughout my career working with early stage startups, is while it sounds obvious, it is somewhat of an eye-opening comment to a lot of entrepreneurs, because they often think it's about their technology. And the technology is just a tool or vehicle that you are going to use to hopefully satisfy, delight, save, cure, remedy your customers. And if you do that well, gross oversimplification, but they will pay you handsomely for that. And at the earliest stages, particularly when you're raising your first round, and I kind of touched on this a moment ago, investors are looking for how well, not just do you understand your technology. I think in a lot of cases, in that first meeting, they're going to take it on faith, particularly if you're coming from an academic institution, that you understand the technology, that you understand the science. But what they're really looking for is, do you really understand the market and the customer and the very complex ecosystem that you are about to enter? And when they hear things like, who is this for? Oh, this is for, hospitals, or this is for dermatologists, or this is for nurses, is so high level and so general, it's a little bit of a red flag. And so the advice how we work with these aspiring entrepreneurs is to really help them and teach them and support them in their efforts to learn how to talk to their prospective customers before they have anything to sell, to validate the need that they are trying to satisfy, and to unpack and understand what is that, who are those ecosystem of customers and players and stakeholders that are between you and the ultimate beneficiary of your product or service. Right? Because if you just use a therapeutic as an example, right? The most, particularly for anything that's going to require a prescription, patients don't make a decision in most cases to consume or receive that product, right? There's a clinician who's making that decision. There's probably some board or committee who's reviewing if that's going into the formulary. It has to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It has to be put, there has to be a CPT code for a payer to agree to pay for it, and all these other things. And I think a lot of particularly scientific entrepreneurs just assume, if I have good data, then that's all I need to do, and they're gonna roll out the red carpet for me and throw money at me, and I'll have a successful startup. And it's just not that simple, because the environment that you're going into is ridiculously complex. Someone once gave me this metaphor that I've never forgotten, that healthcare, and I don't even think this begins to scratch the surface of the complexity, but healthcare is like going out to dinner where one person makes the reservation, one person orders the food, another person eats the food, and a fourth person pays for it. And understanding what are the interests, needs, and motivations of all four of those people in that silly example are critical to the success of your business. And so that's not about going out and asking people if they want this or if this would work, but it's really understanding their needs, preferences, problems, priorities, constraints. What's the existing standard of care? What are the deficiencies in the status quo? What other remedies, treatments, therapies, solutions, broadly speaking, have they looked at before? Why haven't those ones worked? Why haven't they panned out? And really understanding that environment that you're going into, because that is as, if not more important than actually the efficacy of the technology at the end of the day, because that's how to your point, how you mitigate risk.
I am so impressed that encapsulates, there's just so much to unpack there. I think let's take a step back and define what risk is, because we had a really great question from one of the viewers here saying she's an entrepreneur, she left her job, she's taking the ultimate risk. That's not risk. From an investor standpoint, that's just what you need to do. It's like a binary event. You can't be a part-time CEO. And so risk is not the risk of the personal engagement of the entrepreneur. Risk is the investment that is being made by investors to support the growth of your company. And it's not just the dollars, by the way, it's lost opportunity cost, because resources have to be allocated both in terms of dollars and in human power.
Correct.
Most of the investors take board seats if they have substantial investments. That means they can't take a board seat on every single company that comes through their door. And so typically they'll take 3, 4, 5 different board seats. So the risk that I'm talking about is the risk from industry. When industry brings a technology or a company into its fold, they make big sea changes. Typically, they'll start off with feasibility studies. They'll get to know you over time. But there's, again, a risk that the corporation and the investors have that it's very important for the CEO to know about. And one of the things I want to highlight is all the things that you just mentioned, which is the ability to understand the entire ecosystem, the payers, the providers, all of these different pieces, the regulatory issues, the legal aspects. All of these things send a message to investors, both on the corporate and on the institutional side, that you can execute, that you have a vision that is 360, that you know all the different pain points in this process, and that you have the team, and you have to bring some data to this equation that says you can handle the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, and you can deliver to the company and to the investor certain benchmarks that will satisfy their risk tolerance, not yours. And this is about building confidence and trust and relationships. So the first part of that process is to understand that you need to satisfy a risk bar in understanding the marketplace, as Frank was talking about, understanding how your product will actually be commercialized. Love your thoughts on that, Frank.
Well, I love my thoughts on which part of it. There was a lot there.
The commercializing part.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it all goes in my book. It all goes back to your customer, and understanding their needs and struggles and dissatisfaction with the status quo or the standard of care, or where they are experiencing pain, either in a morbidity or side effects or costs or time or whatever it is, and understand what are their motivations that you need to wrap your head around. Because when you talk about risk, right, the only risk that they're really concerned, that investors are really concerned about, is, are they going to, well, I mean, two layers, right? You talked about opportunity cost, but I think they're really anchored on the financial risk. That are they going to make their money back and then some, right? And they need to, knowing that the overwhelming majority of venture-backed startups in their portfolio are going to fail, right? They need to have outsized returns on a few to make up for what's going to be the majority of them, the losers. And this is even true at the best funds out there. And so they don't want to fund you to see if you can actually turn this research or this target or this idea into a product. They don't want to invest to see if you can assemble a team. They don't want to invest to see if there's a customer who's not just interested but willing to use and or pay for your product or service. And then they also don't want to see if you can figure out how to sell and market it. So those are 4 or 5, implicit risks when they're looking at whether or not this investment makes sense for them. Because another thing I tell entrepreneurs a lot is that, investors don't care that you need money. It's of very little consequence to them that you need money. They want to know if they can make money. And that doesn't mean that you have to tell them exactly how you're going to make money, but they are going to look to you to say, these are the things that this business knows and needs to know and needs to do and has done and will do in order for this to be a large-scale success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Understanding that there's certain requirements in this high pressured, high, fast paced moving environment. So the game is different than it was, 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years ago. You know, the cost of capital is higher, therefore the bar is higher. Therefore, the expectations when walking through the door are higher, and ultimately the KPIs are higher. Now, what do investors do really, really well? They're able to take what they see as valuable assets in terms of technology and teams and be able to see how that fits into their overall portfolio and their appreciation of how they're going to spend their investment dollars and their time. It's really, really important for you to understand who you're talking to. Angels are different than VCs. Industry, investors are different than early stage VCs. Family funds are kind of all over the place, depending on whether you're in the U.S., Middle East, or in Europe. The point is, what entrepreneurs do really, really well is they have a verve and excitement and energy that can't be compared to anything that you see in industry. That verve is an asset. That excitement is an asset. But the next step in this difficult market is to understand that that has to be coupled with the things that Frank is talking about, which is real business acumen about how your product is going to integrate into a commercial pathway. And most importantly, how your interaction within industry, and this goes for when you present to investors as well, understand your marketplace, understand your pathway to commercialization, how that integration is going to outcompete the 10 other companies that are using AI in the same way that you're using AI. And so, from my perspective, entrepreneurs have a tremendous asset in their energy and their enthusiasm, their blindless faith. But now there is a call out to step that up to a new level of understanding. So, doing your due diligence about the marketplace, as Frank was talking about, your competitors, the business hurdles, the pressures from all different sides, whether it's regulatory or other, and really understanding how your product is going to integrate into an industry that is looking for change, but compared to you is Jurassic and slow. Having that business understanding means building trust and collaborations and partnerships and creating this new dialogue between yourself and people like Google and Amazon and Apple, who are constantly adapting and constantly reinventing. Amazon started out as a bookseller. It is now going to be the biggest pharmacy in the United States, second only to Walmart. It is going to clearly make its bread and butter and main revenue stream from its cloud services. So these are huge lessons, I think, that are exciting because companies like Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and Google are constantly looking to adapt, pivot, and grow. And they're going to use your technology and your blindness, energy, and verve to be accretive. So this is a glass half full story, which is you have something they want. And I'm just really excited about this whole era now in healthcare because using digital platforms like AI, machine learning, and deep learning, and eventually quantum computing is going to open runway for tremendous opportunities. So, Frank, perhaps you and I can talk about a couple of case studies before our time finishes up about some of the exciting companies that you're seeing, which I think mark this interesting intersection in healthcare and in industry. It could be AI based, or it could be, other technologies.
Sure. So I'll talk about one of our most recent investments, which came out of our medical school or medical center called Canary, which is based on the work of Dima Reinberg, who's a neuroscientist. and who has been studying olfaction for a long time, and has been able, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to describe this necessarily the way that he would, but has essentially been able to decode the process of understanding how we smell and what are the fingerprints of different smells and how that is transferred from the environment around us into our nose and up into our brain. And this has been his life's work. And to make a long story short, is been able to turn that into a chipset that can actually capture that information between the nose and the brain, and can now use that by making a very small chip that can be implanted in a rat, and then be able to use that rat in the way that we use dogs today, to detect smells, but where we actually know what the rat is smelling, rather than having to spend all that time and energy training that dog to smell that one thing that it can smell. And all we know is that we've trained it to bark when it smells that one thing. So now you can imagine a situation where you could have a rat in a box, and it could be used in, say, in a port, to detect the presence of explosives, all different varieties of them, illegal drugs, all kinds of other things that bad actors might be trying to bring in through the ports. It can work when the animal is asleep. It can work, meaning that the animal doesn't get tired like dogs do. We don't have union rules for dogs that are sending things, but they vote with their own feet. When they're tired, they stop working. And this is opening up a whole new panoply of new opportunities in a whole broad variety of markets, such as security, pest detection, and ultimately in healthcare, right? We already know that animals have the capacity to smell the presence of certain diseases in humans already. And this is going to, we believe, accelerate that, even though that's not their initial market. But they've gone out to tie all this together. I'm telling you all this because there was tremendous number of very large markets that this could serve, but they were all very different markets. It was through the founding team going out and validating the needs and opportunities in the marketplace with those customers, understanding the path to adoption, understanding the value, what was it worth to actually solve those problems, the deficiencies with the existing solutions, that they were able to actually figure out that path to market and ultimately raise the money that they have, that is enabling them to bring this to market, which is in process right now. But that's a recent investment that we made that we're really excited about, that has just blockbuster potential.
What a great story. The word that comes to mind there is courage. You know, they are courageous in being able to explore something, but also the courage is sitting right next to what one important thing with what you said was there was an iterative process embedded there. They went back and forth understanding how could they practically, operationally do this? What were the hurdles? What were the headwinds? So let me take that as a cue for a company that I think is going to be outstanding, and the CEO is going to be speaking next Tuesday. It's called In Silico Medicine. This is not a company that's on the tip of everyone's tongue, but I guarantee you in 10 years, they're going to be on the cover of Time magazine. They are single-handedly revolutionizing drug discovery and drug development. The CEO, Alex Varonkoff, is absolutely brilliant serial entrepreneur. And he is using AI technology in a platform-based approach to be able to have higher predictive value of targeting, higher predictive value of clinical trials, and has brought the first AI-driven drug to market in 30 months, which is really 25% of the time that's needed for the course of a normal drug to go to market. Most importantly, he is a master at strategic partnering and collaboration. He has the ability to really enroll his team, who are incredibly determined to make this the number one company in the world in drug discovery and drug development. And he has the ability to convince investors, he's raised over $400 million, that his platform is the winner. And I say that because it takes courage to not only have a great technology, but also to be able to listen to people to understand, how do you move that technology along investor roads, corporate roads. And one of the things that he did, which was really courageous, is he brought his company to China. In an era where U.S.-Chinese relationships are arguably very weak, he established a very large footprint in robotics and using AI and robotics to be able to drive his success. So I think you're going to hear next Tuesday at noon from Alex, not only about in silico medicine, but the other field, which again is courageous to be able to embark on, which is longevity and aging. Looking at people like Alex Zarankov and in silico medicine as a case study is my strong pleasure to be able to bring to CEO entrepreneurs, because he really, not only is he working 24/7, but he has the vision and the understanding that in order for him to be successful, he needs to build strong partnerships. So one of the partnerships he just announced was with one of the best companies, certainly in the US, Exelixis. These types of partnerships require a lot of conversation, and they require a real trust in both parties. I would say it's our job to endeavor, and perhaps Frank's job also, in terms of building out these companies, is to find out how emerging companies can fit into rising stars like in silico medicine. We have a company that we're working with called Pepper Bio, an outstanding combination of a CEO from Harvard Business School and from the healthcare industry, and a CSO from MIT who is expert in AI machine learning. They're the type of company with their technology that is going to be accretive potentially to silico medicine. And that's what I want to urge CEO entrepreneurs to understand. Building relationships with companies that I consider tip of the spear, like silico, that's your pathway forward. Building those collaborations and those partnerships where your technology, like from Pepper Bio, can be accretive to companies that are doing amazing things, allows you to hold on to the details and be incorporated in an easier way than if you have to necessarily go the traditional route through biopharma, which is also important. So these different ways to navigate your technology and your team depend upon your ability to build these personal connections in an era of AI, which is all about technology. And I am thrilled to be able to be a part of that. I know that Frank, has kind of heart and soul invested in NYU. The fact of the matter is that NYU over the past 10 years has skyrocketed in terms of its national and international reputation, in terms of being a top 10 leader in producing companies. So Frank and his colleagues are doing something right.
We try.
I hope this is one of many conversations, Frank. We just scratched the surface, and we went overtime scratching that surface. Do you have any final thoughts or comments to the people that are listening here today?
I just, if I could maybe sum up what I said, it's, the sooner you get out talking to people, and I don't mean investors, but I mean to your prospective customers, and understanding how and where your solution might fit into that ecosystem, the better off. You need to do that even before you even think about investment. And that's not something that you outsource to a business person or an MBA or an intern. That's something that the technical founders need to do, so they can understand how their technology and solution fits and maybe needs to be adapted or pivoted or changed or altered in large or small ways to into the market. So the sooner you do that, the better.
I couldn't agree more. I would end it with a note and a shout out to Reid Hoffman. When he started working and putting together LinkedIn, in his podcast a few months ago, he talked about the hundreds of people that he spoke to get real world feedback, iterative process, shaping his vision. And that was not just in the beginning of the process, that was throughout the entire course until it was acquired by Microsoft. So I think that this is another case study, another data point. And as a scientist, I look for data points about what has been successful and how can you transfer that over to emerging companies and entrepreneurs. So my strongest thank you to everyone who has joined us today, especially those entrepreneurs. I salute you. I know Frank has tremendous respect for the things that you do. The work is very, very difficult. And especially in an environment like this, it takes a lot of courage, a lot of patience, and it takes community. So I think one of the things that we could talk about perhaps in our next conversation, Frank, is the community at NYU, which has just been growing like gangbusters. You know, I think if you look at any aspect of the importance of community in any particular study about happiness or about success, it all boils down to your place in the community and the ability for that community to be successful and to grow. So I think that's even more important now when money is tight. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We spent an extra 12 minutes talking about some of the things that Frank and I are passionate about. And I would urge you, please contact me if you want to. I'm more than happy to talk with you. My email is endeavor@capital.com. I can always pass along the message to Frank. And I want to thank everyone for spending this time this afternoon. And please, I urge you to register next Tuesday. In Silicon Valley, we'll be on talking about the things that they're doing globally, the AI and robotics that they're bringing into drug discovery and drug development, and also a strong focus on longevity and aging and how technologies over the next 5 to 10 years, I think, are going to be reshaping that entire industry. I would say that aging is probably going to be the number one medical and possibly scientific area in the next 50 years. As we understand more about physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, genetics, integration of AI, machine learning, and finally quantum computing is really going to open up the true door to preventative care, not illness care. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you, Frank, so much for extending yourself.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks to BetterHealth and Endeavor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your community, and I love the work you're doing.
Thank you, Frank. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday. Don't forget to register for this incredible In Silico Medicine webinar podcast next Tuesday. Frank, hold on for 1 second. I'm going to sign off.